I like to think that every song just has a world that it lives in, or several worlds that happen one after another.
What's good, everybody? Welcome back to Love Music More. Amazing episode today with Andrew Scheps, one of my personally favorite mix engineers. He's the guy that my mentor looked up to, so naturally I look up to him. And all of his music that he's made throughout his entire career is the music that I grew up with, like, Red Hot Chili Peppers. Just absolute giant of music. Everything from Adele to, modern Hozier to, everything in between. So if you want to understand how to make a vocalist sound amazing, how to make rock guitars rip through the headphones, this is the guy to do it. And he's also super inspirational to me because he does everything. I mean, everything from software engineering to, making your own company to mixing. It's just a totally inspirational human being because he refuses to be bounded by any given box. And that is what I aim to be as well, thanks to him. Before we get into it, I want to thank our title sponsor, DistroKid. DistroKid makes music distribution fun and easy with unlimited uploads, and artists get to keep 100% of royalties and earnings, and you can get 30% off today if you go to distrokid.com/VIP/lovemusicmore, all one word. You can get started. 1 million plus artists rely on DistroKid to get their music onto Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, TikTok, Tidal, Instagram, and all of the major streaming services. I love it because I'm able to go on my mobile app and check my DistroKid anywhere I go. So check out the DistroKid mobile app on iOS and Android and use our promo code at distrokid.com/VIP/lovemusicmore. Hope you enjoy this episode. I certainly did. What's good, everybody? Welcome back to Love Music More. I am Scoobert Dubert, and I'm joined today with Andrew Scheps. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. You have been an absolute hero of mine. I've listened to your mixes my entire life growing up, and you have influenced so much about the way I think about music and the way that music should sound. So excited to be chatting. So where are you coming to us from today?
I am basically right in the middle of England. There's a thing about England where apparently you can't be more than 65 miles from the coast. I am 65 miles from the coast. Incredible.
Yeah. So I was reading about your journey out to England, or is it Wales? Where specifically are you?
No, in England. I think when we first moved over, all of my analog gear went into a studio in Wales, and I think that's why everybody thinks I live in Wales. I'm close to Wales, but I'm still in England. What
was that like in terms of, so was it a pandemic kind of decision to like change scenery?
No, it was pre-pandemic, actually. We live 5 minutes from where my wife grew up. So it's a part of the world we've spent a huge amount of time. Once our kids went off to college, we were spending more time because I was doing Mix with the Masters seminars every summer, or every year anyway. And so we would just keep making the trips longer and longer and spend some time with her mom. And then we got to the point where we decided, well, let's just make the trip endless, basically. So it was really organic.
I love that. And I also think that it speaks to such an interesting part of your career in terms of the different hats that you've worn, the different places that you've lived, people that you've worked with, all sorts of genres, Red Hot Chili Peppers to Adele, winning Grammys. What advice would you have maybe to a younger person that's trying to figure out, what's my path? What do I do? How do they navigate a career? They want to do music, but they don't exactly know where to start or what kind of genre. They're trying to pigeonhole themselves. From your perspective, as somebody, lived all over the world, worked with all sorts of different genres, what kind of advice would you give?
It's hard. I mean, I think that, the new age way to say it would be that you don't choose what you do, it chooses you. But the important part of that is that you'll try something and you'll feel passionate about it. Then that's probably at least part of what you should be doing. Because it's this weird thing. It's like playing the lottery, where in the back of your mind, you think like, yeah, but it could all blow up and I'll be super famous and rich and everything will be taken care of. But the reality for 99-point-something% of the people in the industry is it's ridiculously hard work. Everybody else thinks that you don't work. and that maybe they shouldn't even bother paying you because you're just having so much fun all the time. Like, it's really, really hard. I mean, part of my advice, usually when I'm talking to college students, is make sure that you actually do want to do it, because assume that it's going to be hard work and you're going to be scraping by for a really long time, and then decide, well, would I rather go get a gig that has set hours and that'll pay for me to be able to have this be like my serious hobby, as opposed to my soul-crushing career?
That's so well said. That's so well said. And I know that a lot of people look at this thinking about like, oh, if I just get in the door, become an assistant, or start at the bottom up, running, grabbing meals, cleaning toilets, work my way up. Do you think that that's still alive after the pandemic? Like, what do you think of like that kind of pipeline of mentorship? Because I know that everybody has a little bit of a different perspective. I was listening to your podcast, talking to awesome people about how assistants for you is very much like, you want to see them grow and leave the nest and have their own careers. Do you think that that's still a viable path for folks?
I think it is. I mean, I think it's very different from when I started in kind of mid-'80s and going through the 90s, where studios were where people made records, basically. The home studio was just starting in the 90s. And now, obviously, most stuff is being made in home studios, and everybody is wearing lots of different hats. But that said, you can still go help out a buddy who's in a band who's making a record. And you'll go from assistant to engineer very quickly, but you'll learn stuff. So I think that what you learn and how you do it is different now, because the world is just very different. But it's very hard to just learn it on your own in your room. Some people do, and some people can, and they end up being really creative, and they're doing stuff in ways that nobody ever would have thought of. And if they had worked with other people, they probably would never have gone down that path. And that's amazing. But I think there are more people who will hit a dead end because of just the lack of input. Even if you're the assistant, there's still a collaboration. There's still when you're stuck, someone will suggest to you like, hey man, why don't you try this? And that'll get you over a hurdle that you might not have been able to get over on your own. So if you can find a way to do it, I do think it's really important to be working with people who are more experienced than you.
I also think there's an element of kind of learning by osmosis in mixing specifically, because there's like 15 different ways you could go and they're all technically right directions. And that can lead to a lot of decision paralysis, or maybe even worse, the constant revision or the self-revision, where you'd never send it to the client. It's actually like mix 15, but they see mix 1. Any advice kind of on that end, or maybe how to navigate that if somebody's in the dark?
Yeah, it's easy for me to say how I do it now, and it's hard for me to remember what it was like at the beginning. But like for mixing specifically, is that you shouldn't have a vision of how you want it to sound, because that doesn't make any sense, because the source material you've got is going to dictate how it sounds, and that you've got to be going after how you want it to feel. And when I'm teaching seminars, one of the things I really try and focus on, it's like, okay, so just as an example, and then I'll come back to the thing that's relevant, is all through high school, I was a jazz trumpet player. And then I wanted to learn how to record, so I went to the University of Miami, who had a 4-year program in recording. But to do it, you had to be a music performance major, which is insane because it's a ridiculously good music school. So I managed to get in on trumpet. I'm not that great. But the first day in the first rehearsal of big band, everybody was talking about, okay, how long are we holding these notes? Are we cutting off on the beat or on the and or whatever? And it was a discussion that had never happened in high school. Like, what? But I never thought about that. The music says where they start, right? And then but obviously that completely transforms the way an ensemble is going to play stuff. And so it just completely opened my mind, but it also gave me this perspective. This isn't a great parallel. I just actually wanted to say it out loud. This is not terribly relevant. Okay, so back to what I was going to say though, is that if you're focusing on how you want a mix to feel, it's really easy to get stuck in the middle of sections where the emotion in a song is actually from the transitions between sections. It's the feeling you get going from the verse into the chorus and then how you get back down to the verse after the chorus. What does the bridge feel like? Is it a different world? Is it the broken down world of the chorus? And all of that. And if you can get an idea of how you want those bits to feel, when that is right, it's just super obvious that you're done. And then it's having the ability to just leave it, to not say, yeah, transition in the chorus feels great, but man, that snare sound. Like, dude, part of the reason it works is because the snare sounds the way it does, and it doesn't matter what it sounds like. Like, for me, the first stage of mixing is I'm prepping a session, and while I'm doing it, I listen to the rough mix or the session as they left it. And in my head, the checklist is how I want stuff to feel. Either this should feel so much bigger, or, oh my God, this feels amazing. I can't lose sight of this. And it's just moments. It could be the way a line in the vocal is just way too loud, but it's so awesome because you hear some physical thing that was going on in their throat, or all that stuff is what's important and what makes people want to listen to stuff again. The sonics are cool, but it is only in service of that. So if you keep that in mind, it's actually much easier to finish a mix. Well, no, it's much easier to know when it's done. It doesn't make it easier to finish it.
Really, really well said. A few things that I want to point out that I really like. So I had a great conversation with John Stork about serendipity. And I liked your talking about kind of going where you're led and where your passion leads you. I wanted to ask you as well about workflow automation and the technical side of what you've done as somebody that wears a lot of hats and extends your career and follows where your passion leads. And maybe ways that, I don't know, I think music and technology have merged and they continue to merge heavier and heavier. And I think that's what a lot of people in college are kind of looking at too, is like, maybe I can make a plugin company. Maybe I could think in software. Do you have any advice through that whole journey of, because I saw you at the NAMM show 2 years ago, something like that. I was really struck by your passion for software in addition to music. I'm just curious, any perspective on that too?
Well, I mean, it's the interface, right? Like, so I say, oh, you need to make a mix feel a certain way. Well, the only way you can do that is by using, if you're mixing in the box, plugins. Like, that's it. That's all you've got. You've got level, pan, plugins. End of story. So they're super important, and you want ones that inspire you. And it doesn't have to be because it's some crazy weird interface. It can be like when I did my channel strip with Waves, what's inspiring about it is it's everything I need most of the time in one window, and I move a couple of knobs and it sounds like what I want.
Yes.
So if you want to start a plugin company, it's all about the ideas. Like, you could, with ChatGPT and Juice, you can write a plugin in an afternoon, and you don't have to have any idea what you're doing.
Yes.
I've done some amazing programming this morning in Python, and I don't know Python.
Awesome.
So
awesome.
So it's all about the ideas. And I have a feeling at some point we're going to talk about AI, and then so that will bring us back to some more thoughts about that. But don't start a plugin company because you think you can do a better 1176 plugin. There are like 40 of them, and I don't think I'm exaggerating, and I might be counting under. Like, maybe they're 50 or 60. Nobody needs another one of those. But you could take that compression topology and put it in an interface that's totally different and make it creative for people. And then all of a sudden, now you've built a new tool, even though under the hood it's not necessarily new. So yeah, it's the ideas. In the same way, I think that parallels very much being an artist. You know, if you can't decide what genre you want to be an artist in, if it's because you love so many genres, well, cool. Then just keep poking at them, and maybe one will help pay for the others. Yeah. But if it's because you really just have absolutely no idea, then probably you're not that type of artist. You need to find a band that you like or someone to collaborate with and let them make those decisions. Because, like, for me as a producer, I don't do it from scratch. I'm always responding to what other people have done, and I think that's why my discography is so crazy. It's all over the place because I'm reacting to things, and I like stuff in every genre. I hate stuff in every genre as well. Yeah, it's really important to find a reason for making the stuff you're making, whether it's personal or hopefully, you know, because the rest of the world wants it.
I love the connection between all these points that I'm starting to see of talking about cutoff time and trumpet playing and having that influence perspective on mixing and recording. And then the idea of not just making a plugin because it's cool tech, but making it from the perspective of the end user, the person that's going to be like trying to elevate their game or eliminate some amount of churn or BS that they have to do in their day-to-day. I think that that's a great mentality that honestly the world needs more of, and probably as we get more and more AI, that's going to be maybe the number one skill is how can you think of the totality? How can you think more broadly? Yeah.
And also, I think, hearing you sort of summarize what I've been talking about, I think it's also very easy to think like, well, you can just be messy then.
Yeah.
Just like, it feels great or whatever. But that's not true at all.
Yes.
If you leave lots of bad edits in your vocal comp, you cannot make the song personal. It's impossible because you're constantly drawing people out of it because that's not a natural thing. Their brain will not let that alone. They have to listen to it and like, what the hell was that? So there's a lot of very meticulous, horrible work that I do in my software and in my plugin development and in my mixing. Like, it's always there. So it's not like it's a shortcut to say your snare doesn't have to sound a certain way, but it better sound right.
Yes.
And it can't sound right if there's something wrong with something else that steps on it. So it's not easier to do that, but I think that if you can focus on that, then what you're doing is you separate the tools you're using from the result you get by using the tools. So you're only ever assessing the result. Don't assess the tools themselves and the minuscule job that they're doing. I don't know if that makes sense, but
it does. It does.
You've got to zoom out all the time.
And I like that of like zoom in really far to assess like what are the things that are taking me out of this artistic moment, like a weird resonance or bad vocal edits or something like that, so that you can zoom back out and assess the emotional.
And if you zoom out, don't ever look for problems. Because if you're any good at your job, they'll find you.
Right.
So before I send a mix, I will often have it playing quietly or even on my computer monitor speakers or whatever. And I'll think like, I think this thing's done. And I'll check email or I'll do whatever while it plays 2 or 3 times. And usually something's like, whoa, what the hell was that? And then you're like, oh, okay. And then you might become actively listening again and realize that that's the tip of some iceberg that you've completely ignored up until now. But if you're always zoomed in, you're going to miss things because the shape of it will never change. You've got to be completely objective about it, which is impossible. So, yeah. Anyway, blah, blah, blah.
No, this is really good. That's one of the reasons why I like talking to mix engineers so much is like there is the push and pull of the artistic and the technical, of the commercial and the like procedure and I want to try something completely different. There's always injection of new technology or the same technology with a different flavor. I'm pretty sure I have 5 different UAD 1176s just from one company alone. I think that intersection is just such a fascinating part of the industry and one that people, even on the artist side, sometimes feel like put in tracks, get back. Wow, it sounds so much better. Like, we'll fix it in the mix kind of idea. It's kind of like almost like as mastering is, mixing is also its own kind of black box.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you've got 10 different 1176 plugins, well, how are you going to choose which one to use? You're going to choose the one that feels best to you when you pop it on a track. And it could be that it feels better because it looks better. Mm-hmm. Like, it could be anything. But I can't believe for a second that for every single time you want to use an 1176, you're going to go through all the plugins and decide which is the right one for that track. You're just going to pick a favorite because of something or other, and that's going to be your go-to.
It's so true. And also, I think you can get to a similar result through several different paths. Like I've talked to a lot of great mixers who will use stock plugins because they're fast or they know them. And it'll surprise a lot of people because it's like, well, you're not using like the fancy toy. It's like, nah, like De-Verb does it, whatever. Yeah,
absolutely. My plugin folder, I think last time I looked, I've got like 3,200 plugins or something absolutely stupid.
Awesome.
But it's because people send me stuff to mix. There'll be plugins in the session I've never heard of. And so I get demos and I listen to them. And half the time I end up buying them because I need to be able to recreate what they were doing. Otherwise, I'm starting from scratch on something that they already like, and blah, blah, blah. So it builds up like crazy. I would say way over 95% of the time, if I'm putting something on the insert, it's going to be either my omnichannel from Waves, because I built it and it's got everything in there, or it's SansAmp, which is stocked with Pro Tools. Like, that's it. 5% of the time, I'm looking for something. And that's when I'll dive into the other 3,198 plugins, you know.
Yes.
But I would never finish anything if I was worried about what was the right thing to use. So I only know if what I'm using is wrong, because I can't get it to do the thing I want it to do. And you can. You always can.
What do you think of the kind of newer-ish class of plugins, like the reactive stuff, like a Soothe or a Gullfoss or a Track Spacer? I see a lot of those on sessions nowadays because they're fast, and I think that's a lot of what people are. They're like tracking and using it. How do you feel about kind of that class of almost AI adjacent, maybe Mercury, but like that whole world?
I mean, I think it's fascinating tech. I think with any plugin, there are artifacts to what it does. And so sometimes it's like, oh, there's harmonic distortion. You know, like every single piece of analog gear ever built has noise and harmonic distortion. And you're like, okay, well, I like those artifacts. That's cool. The more kind of monolithic some of the plugins get, you can't reach inside and turn down the little bit of artifacting that you don't like. So like Soothe is amazing. But if it like won't let go of a certain thing and you can't figure out how to have it keep doing the thing it's unbelievably great at, but without destroying the air or whatever it is.
Yes.
And I'm just using it as an example. It's not like Soothe has an issue that other ones don't. Then you get to the point where you have to make a decision about, do I live with the fallout or do I just have to figure out how to do this a different way? So that, again, I'm just going back to the plugins I made because it's easy for me to talk about them. So the second plugin I did with Waves was Parallel Particles. And I wanted it to be super complicated under the hood, which it is. I mean, the audio routing inside that plugin is insane. Cool. But it's got 4 knobs. That's it. You turn it up. If you like it, great. If you don't, turn the knob back down. But it does mean that there are more situations where it's like, it's close, but no. As opposed to then the next one, which is my channel strip, which you have control over absolutely everything. And I tried to make it intuitive and blah, 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 but it still is to the point where you kind of have to know what you're doing, but you'll get exactly what you want. So that's just the trade-off. And I think that some of these plugins are so powerful, you would never be able to do what they're doing. And so you would take whatever comes with it. The problem, though, is that like when Auto-Tune first came out, you're too young. You don't remember this. In fact, you might be younger than Auto-Tune. I don't know.
I don't know.
It's possible. It's possible. So when it first came out, it was magic. It was like, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
This is impossible. The separation of pitch to formant and time, that was unbelievably nuts. So it got used on everything.
Yep.
And obviously there was then the share hit and whatever.
Yes.
But even with just minor tuning, there was a sound that Auto-Tune had, but nobody heard it for the first 6 months because you just couldn't hear it because it was like, oh my God. And then, especially because it was being used everywhere, it's like, oh, right, there's this little bit of change up at around 10K. There's like some weird thing. And it wasn't necessarily bad, but it was different and it was consistent. And obviously now it does not have anything like that going on, but the early algorithms for what it was doing. And so people started to wonder like, oh, hold on a second, can I auto-tune this because of the thing that nobody heard for a long, long time? And that's always the scary part to me when there's something that's like, oh my God, 1 knob and it's fantastic. Like in a year, am I going to listen to 4 albums I did with it and say, oh, because I didn't hear it? So I'm not saying that's the case with any of them, but because of experience, that's my fear with stuff like that. But some of it is unbelievably cool.
I really like that. It almost feels like a drug or something. Like 2 years down the line, you're like, oh yeah, there were side effects. We didn't know.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, my teeth fell out, but you know.
I mean, it is interesting too to think about like almost like a flavor connection or like food and drink kind of can have the same thing where it's something really bold. It can mask an off flavor like an IPA or something like that. You can think it tastes really good, but then on that fourth sip, you're like, what is that? Like buttered popcorn flavor or something that's snuck in. It's interesting too to think about like the strength of a plugin or the strength of an audio signal masking some of the unintended consequences.
Yeah, and sometimes, those are minor and it's worth it.
Yeah.
Absolutely worth it.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me kind of think about noise reduction, tape plus tape combination that was really popular, I think, in the mid to late 70s of using like a noise reducer, like harmonic saturator plus tape to try to get back in some of like the high-end, top-end information out of analog systems. I wonder if there's going to be unique, like kind of novel plug-in chains that try to each mask the other. I guess like Air or some of the things that people do on the top end might be part of that answer of what's going on in a modern
Yeah, it could be. I mean, and sometimes like Aphex Oral Exciters, which maybe that's part of like what you're thinking about.
Yep.
Sometimes it's a great way to get top end, and not because you've messed it up before, but it's like if you want high frequencies on a vocal and you just start EQing them in, well, it might be that there's some weird whistle at the top of the vocal because something like something was wrong with the microphone, or it might be there's just nothing there.
Yeah.
But with the Aphex, it's going to synthesize high frequencies based on what's going on a little bit below it, and so it's much less natural, but it's cool. And on a dense mix, you're going to hear that top end a lot more than you're going to hear a gentle shelf. So it's, and harmonic distortion is your friend. Let's not talk about analog versus digital.
Yes, that sounds good.
Okay, good. But harmonic distortion is your friend.
I agree. I was just talking to Craig Bauer about the difference between the mix knob versus parallel processing. Kind of like the idea of like being additive versus being like destructive. And it's that kind of clicked for me because I was thinking about it from a gain staging perspective. Like, for example, when I'm doing my guitar pedals, that's how I came to mixing, is I started to like all of the knobs of guitar pedals, and I said, maybe I could do that across the entire song. But what really helped click was I had some some guitar pedals that sucked out gain or sucked out tone before the next. And whenever they turned on, it just didn't sound as good, even if I cranked up the amp. And that's when I started to kind of understand, like, okay, you preserve your volume, preserve the order of things, and mixing started to make a lot more sense. Curious kind of your take on parallel processing. I know that backbus, the idea of harmonic distortion, all of these kind of come into the same world. Would love to learn more about your philosophy on it. Mix knob versus parallel processing.
Well,
grouping.
I mean, mix knob versus parallel, it's just you have less control with a mix knob.
Okay. Yeah.
Because you can't completely change what the wet is doing without affecting what the dry is doing. Instead of two faders, technically, though, there's no real difference, but you can be a lot more flexible with the signal routing as well. Because I can have a parallel thing that's 5 things. And that's going to be different than doing 50% through 5 different plugins. It's different audio going through. My thing with parallel compression has always been that if you do serial compression, so on an insert, forget about wet dry, you're changing the thing, right? I mean, that's what compression does. It reduces the dynamic range. But if you do it only parallel, you're still reducing the dynamic range, but you're not doing it by turning the loud stuff down. So the parallel, you're turning the loud stuff down, and usually more than you would on the insert, and then you put a little bit of that back in, and it's not exactly true, but it's basically like it takes the quiet stuff and makes it louder, and that's why you have less dynamic range, and dynamic range has this, like, oh my God, you need as much of it as possible, and that's absolutely not true.
Yes.
You're always trying to reduce the dynamic range of things, otherwise they would not have invented compressors. So that's the point. And I find that, especially on things like vocals or acoustic guitars, things where there are a lot of internal dynamics, that if you still have the uncompressed version making it to your mix bus, the emotional attachment to that performance is still there. Ooh. And then you can crush it by bringing the other stuff in, but it doesn't affect it in the same way. But then sometimes I just want to destroy something with a compressor, and so that will happen. But for subtle dynamic range control, I find that the parallel stuff just works better for me. That said, I used to use tons of it, and now there's almost none. My template is set up now that there's none at the beginning, and I have to go get the VCA and turn it up, and I forget a lot of times now. So I'm using a lot less than I used to.
Interesting. Fascinating. Sorry to interrupt this very important broadcast. What I'm asking for is for you to rate it 5 stars, share it with your friends. This is like the most important thing for this podcast to grow. So if you want to do this, you go onto the podcast screen, right? You click on the ... on Spotify. Under there, it says rate show, and you go and you click it. 5 stars. If you could do that for me, that's the best way for the algorithms and all this stuff to share it out with the world. I know that it's a lot to ask, but if you could please just hit those 3 dots and then a 5 star, it would really help us out and helps us, get the word out and spread the love of music. So thank you. If you're listening on YouTube, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thank you so much. And here's the rest of the episode. Curious with Adele, for example. I know that sometimes I think mix engineers can either overdo it or underdo it for something that's like that intimate, performance-oriented. I know that I've fallen into the trap with really good singer, underdo things because it just already sounds good. Any advice on kind of mixing something that is intimate, that is so vocally oriented, kind of finding that balance in between over and underdoing it?
Well, I mean, in that way, Adele is a bad example because I did almost nothing.
Cool.
It's just
awesome.
balance, and it took me forever to get the balance, but I think there's one mix where it's just there are 5 EQs, and that's it.
Awesome.
And there's nothing on the mix bus. There's nothing. I mean, it's very well recorded. Mm-hmm. It's a great band. She's a fantastic singer. So, you've got good material to work with.
Yes.
But definitely, even on the ones where I was doing more, there is 0 compression on her voice. There is only parallel compression.
Cool.
Because you start to... Now, in the choruses, I mean, she's loud. It doesn't matter. You could compress it, and it would be fine. But when she's singing delicately, she has the control where if you start getting rid of the nuance, then you disconnect. So it was important to keep that. And so that's why the parallel stuff works. So it could still sound mixed, and it's not like, I put up some faders.
Yeah.
But it kept her personal delivery, that's the whole point,
right?
Of the entire record. That's the point. And it's also why I love that cover of Love Song, the little bossa nova at the end of the record, because she's quiet the whole way through. Like, she's an amazing belter, but you can imagine mixing, like if you're mixing loud, it's just brutal.
Yes.
Whereas that track, like, I love mixing quiet songs. Absolutely love it. It's great.
It is so rare to have, songs that live in a certain dynamic range, and then you can just kind of have that sweet spot. It is a beautiful thing, and I think that the people on the other side can really feel that too. I also want to talk to you about kind of the little worlds that mixing can create, because I've listened to a lot of your mixes on headphones, and I find that really, really fun because you will take me on some journeys where you will throw something like maybe hard in the left ear and leave the right a little open for a while until you have that moment that now everybody starts to arrive. I don't know. I think a lot of mix engineers sometimes focus so much on getting the left-right balance that they miss out on some magic moments. I've never felt that from you. Curious your take on like panning, world building, reverb, and kind of that side.
Yeah. The left-right thing, if it's a band, then I always want to know who the players are.
Okay.
And they're going to be in one spot for the whole song. Now, it might be that it's actually 5 different guitar tracks that are the left guitar player's stuff throughout the song. Like, it's not as simple as that. And it's certainly not only for live performance songs. This is in general. Obviously, once you get away from it being performances on instruments, then that all goes out the window. And then it's much more of a musical arrangement thing. Yeah. But that's why, like, if you start a song, let's say you've got 2 people playing acoustic guitar, but the song starts with just one, all the way through the end of the first verse or something like that. I don't want the guy who comes in the re-intro to be like, whoa, who the hell's that?
Yes.
So in the intro, maybe even before they play, if there's a little bit of noise or a chair squeak, I will absolutely leave that in. Because now you know that somebody's there. They just haven't started playing yet. And so in that environment, I'm very much setting up a world of the musicians. And then on top of that, there can be a bunch of surreal stuff that has nothing to do with it. But I was talking to somebody about this very recently, and someone had described kind of the world mixes live in as a sort of hyperreality.
Okay.
And I don't feel like it's hyperreality, because that implies something that doesn't exist. Whereas I'm making something that couldn't possibly exist in nature, but it is where you live while you listen to the song. And as you say, that can change. It can go from bone dry to having lots of effects or whatever. And I think changing vocal effects throughout a song. There's the classic David Bowie thing where like every line has a different effect on it and stuff. And that's an amazing technique. But it can also just be the difference between verse and chorus. It can be something more subtle than that, where you're just forcing the listener to pay attention to the lyrics because it goes bone dry for one word. And then, but the effects that were on before that were subtle, but it's just like we're talking about transitions between sections, it's the changes either on a specific instrument or by bringing in something that sounds like it's nowhere near anything else. And sometimes it's just cool because you want to delay on something. And sometimes it's on purpose that the bridge, everything is a little bit wetter than it is in the rest of the song because you want it to sort of open up. So I don't overthink it really, but it's very much an on the fly building this thing. But I like to think that every song just has a world that it lives in, or several worlds that happen one after another, as you go. But yeah, and so panning is a big part of that, especially, well, stereo and immersive, where you put stuff that's telling the listener something about it. It's not just my meters are moving the same.
Yes, and that's actually a great transition. I would love to talk to you a little bit about immersive audio, Atmos, kind of where you think it is now. I know that there's a little bit of like a hype cycle to it, I think, where everyone was doing it, everyone was getting certified in the beginning, and now I feel like it's slowed down a little bit, but I'm sure that in your world it's very different than in mine. What's that look like?
Not
right
really.
Okay.
No. I mean, it is a delivery requirement for a lot of labels.
Yeah.
So you have to do it. But at the same time, there are records that I mix where I say, look, I'd really like to do the Atmos. I want to do the immersive mixes on this because I think it's a great record. I already kind of know what I want to do. And they'll say, yeah, we can't afford it. And I said, well, okay, I'll do it cheaper. And I can't compete with the rates that some people are giving. I mean, if you can get someone to do an entire 12-song record for less than $1,000,
Wow.
I'm not going to compete with that.
No.
And maybe that person is super talented, and that'll be great. So, okay, so that's one thing about the immersive mixing, and it's still happening, and it's a real drag, is that, I don't know how true this is, but I would argue that it's much easier to completely screw up a song in immersive than it is in stereo. Because you can rip it apart in so many other ways and make the groove die, make the vocal be too exposed or whatever it is. And that means that percentage-wise, especially because it's such a new technology, the number of bad immersive mixes is huge. And that makes people not like it. So that's a battle we're fighting. But it doesn't make money. So why would... I mean, yes, okay, streaming platforms, certainly Apple is paying more money if people stream in immersive than in stereo. But it's not enough where the labels are like, oh, great, now we should get this done properly. So some people are in a position where they can kind of dictate it and get to do it. I am not. So there's stuff that I've heard where I really think the stereo mixes were great and compelling, and I hear the immersive, and it's like not what I would hope it would be. But as a format, I don't think there is anything better. I think the experience, if you can get in a room with some speakers, it doesn't have to be an amazing setup, but just get some sound behind you, and if possible, get some sound above you. That music listening experience cannot be duplicated in stereo. It just can't, and it's unbelievably great.
Curious where the technology is in terms of like reverbs, delays, like as in platform native applications. Because at least when I was first starting with it, and I haven't done a ton since, there wasn't a lot out there, at least at my level, that I could afford. It felt all very geared towards video games or post-production rather than music production. Has that ecosystem evolved at all?
Yeah. I mean, there are certainly more plugins than there used to be.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
there are plugins that solve problems. Like everybody wanted to be able to have dynamics on objects
Right.
that would be sidechained.
Yeah.
So like a mix bus, but of course you don't have a mix bus.
That was one of the most frustrating things to me, where I was like,
Yeah.
I can't do this, the thing that makes it feel modern or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, and I've figured out ways around it before this stuff came out, and then needing it less than I thought I would. I mean, that's the other thing, is that nobody knew how to do this.
Right.
Nobody. It's not like, well, Dolby knew how to do it for music. Nobody knew how to do it. They had the technology, which is amazing. But the difference between doing a movie in Atmos and doing a song in Atmos, they just couldn't be any more different. The only similarity is the tech behind delivering it to the speakers. That's it.
Yes.
So the tools are definitely better. It's built into more DAWs now than it used to be. I mean, now Logic for a while, Pro Tools, it's been in Cubase and Nuendo for a while, or I don't know about Cubase, but certainly Nuendo. So it's much easier to mess around with, but I think that the thing that's going to make it a format that people care about, and they're already starting to do it, is when consumer electronics companies are making speakers that people can set up easily at home, and someone will hear something and be like, wow, and then that will start them actually paying attention to it. But now, there's so many people listening to immersive mixes on headphones and they don't even know they are.
Yes. So true. I'm curious, I think that this dovetails somewhat. Your relationship with mastering kind of now versus then. Atmos is also kind of an interesting trend in terms of like LUFS and how you set up a mix versus like a stereo mix where you send it off to the mastering. It's not exactly the same with Atmos. I'm not an expert. You are. But curious, your relationship with mastering over the years, how much you do kind of in the mix versus leave for a mastering engineer, and then how your perspective is different between immersive versus stereo for like loudness and kind of that end stage.
Well, I mean, the easy thing to answer first is that for immersive, like if you're delivering Dolby Atmos mixes, they have to be at a certain level, period. And they're measurements in the renderer. So level is not the reason you would use mastering for immersive stuff, period. I do 100% of everything in the mix. And I've never, ever made a mix and then a listening copy. Because that's crazy to me, to send something to the band and like, yes! And then it turns out what's being sent to mastering doesn't sound like that anymore.
Yes.
And you can say, well, it's just limiting, but limiting sounds like something.
Yes.
It completely changes everything. So I do absolutely everything, and I would say most mastering of my stuff in the last 10 years has been flat transfers. It's just like, this is what it's supposed to be. But I'm weird, and it's not, when you're starting out, you need somebody. So the idea of a mastering engineer is that you get a relationship with somebody who can have perspective and make sure that it can go out into the world and translate so people can hear what it is you were trying to do. If you're really far away from what you're trying to do, then if you're lucky, there's a mastering engineer who's like, well, I'll finish your mix for you, basically, is what's going on.
Yeah.
But you want to be getting as close as possible to it. I think that this idea of leaving headroom because you know the mastering engineer is going to want to process, well, okay, fine. But leaving stuff for mastering is insane. If you know what it is, you should do it, because that way you know that it's exactly how you want it. And mastering is not some magic always makes things better thing.
Yeah.
As stuff gets louder, the groove changes because it only gets louder by turning down the loud stuff, which is kick and snare, changes the way the transients work, changes the length of the snare drum, which changes the groove. So it's not as simple as make it louder. It changes the song. So if you can do that yourself and do it well, you should. If you can't, then you should have some idea of what you want and then hope to find somebody who hears mixes the same way you do. Because that's the other thing. It's a super creative process. Once they start doing sonic changes, they're being creative. And if you don't have the same creative vision as a mastering engineer, you're screwed. It's going to come back and you may not even understand what it is. And what are you supposed to do at that point? So, yeah.
I loved that answer. I've had so many friends that have, basically bootstrapped the mix and the recording so that they could give it to a top name, top flight mastering engineer. And they get it back and they're disappointed. And it's like, well, I just think
they can only work with what you give them. And you've got the multi-track, so you can do anything. They've got a stereo mix. Like it's hard. And this is like, I have a lot of friends who are mastering engineers. I do, and they're great, and some of them are absolutely amazing in what they do. I don't even know how the hell they do it. But at the same time, I don't ever want to rely on somebody else to finish my mix, because there's a finishing an album side to mastering, and then there's obviously all the technical metadata, file prep, that side of it.
Right.
But for individual songs, if they do work on it, it's because they're finishing your mix. So if you can do more of that yourself, then it's more of exactly what your vision is. When you're starting out, that's much harder. It's good to have another pair of ears on it. Absolutely. But as you progress, or some people come out of the womb being really good at stuff, if you're getting exactly what you want, don't take it for granted that the mastered version is better. Just make sure that your vision is what's coming out of the speakers.
I love how this wraps back around to the trumpet cutoff ensemble thing with the release, right? It's so easy to think about the attack. It's so hard to think about the release.
Yeah. It's everything. Well, no. I mean, the attack's more important, let's be honest. But the release is super important too.
Going back to the beginning, I do want to talk to you about AI and kind of what it looks like and where it's at. I think that we've painted a good picture of how flexible and creative and multivariate, maybe is the right word, mixing and the creative process is. Where do you think the room for AI actually exists? Like what is your best case scenario? Maybe not what ends up happening or what is happening, but what's the best case scenario of how it fits in?
I think that it's just like when the D88 first came out and the ADAT, all of a sudden people could do something they couldn't do before. They could make a quality digital recording at home. And you'd argue that there are a bunch of cool records made on 4-track cassettes at home too. Mm-hmm. When the MPC 60 came out, all of a sudden you could program drums in a super easy way with Groove. Tools progress and they make people be able to be more creative. And that's what AI is doing on one side, is making tools that let you do things either easier or even better, stuff that you couldn't do at all. So there's a very specific example of this is there's a band called Low Roar that I've been involved in very, very heavily for years and years and years. And on this last record, Ryan, the singer-songwriter, recorded almost all of the songs at a piano, playing and singing. Tons of bleed between the two instruments, which made it impossible for me to do certain things with either the piano or his voice. And 5 years ago, I would have been stuck. Now, using spectral layers, I was able to completely separate the instrument from the bleed. So I could use the bleed of the piano into the vocal mic as kind of an ambient mic for the piano, but it had no vocal in it. And I could get rid of all the vocal in the piano tracks so that I could do any sort of effects I wanted to do on the vocal without doing those same effects on a ghost of the piano. Those kinds of tools that allow you to do something that would have been impossible. Like, okay, the impossible thing was separate the vocal from the piano in a single microphone recording. But what that enabled is a record that is infinitely better. The record would not be the record it is if I couldn't separate those two things. I would have been fucked. And it's a super important record to me, and I think it's an amazing record. And part of it is because the vocal is gigantic,
cool,
and it would not have been able to be that way without it. So those tools are insane, and they're awesome. And you alluded to Soothe and some of the stuff that Waves is doing, and there are a lot of amazing plugins that are listening.
Yes.
But, Ozone has been doing that, and I don't know how much of the very first iterations of that were AI. I think it was more just profiles and things like that. But as they evolve, they're really good. We're not even going to talk about music creation, because that is a completely different use of AI. And I don't want to go into it because it'll piss people off what my kind of take on some of it is. Well, no, here, okay, we'll
Yes.
we'll go
It's
into
a
it.
podcast, yeah.
All right, so here's an example of how I see kind of AI in the world. And it's dangerous is the wrong word, but it has the potential to fuck up everything. Absolutely everything. And part of it is that it will do the work for free, but it's not free because of what it does to everything else. I mean, obviously the running cost of this stuff is insane, but you've completely changed the paradigm of who should get paid for what. Like that, the structure of our society is getting ripped apart by this. So put that aside for a minute. So there was a talk I saw about user interfaces for music stuff. And using AI, the person doing the talk had like tried to get it to come up with some ideas for new ways to interact with an instrument. Like, you know, not a keyboard and not drum pads. Like, what are the other ways we could do this? And so, unlike like the basement at NAMM, which is full of alternative MIDI controllers, it just spit out a bunch of keyboards and things with drum pads, but like made of wood or something. And like, okay, that's not very creative. And so the thing you learn from that is that it's very hard for an AI inference engine to make a leap. It's very good at synthesizing a gigantic amount of information and putting things together and making connections you might not make. But it's not necessarily just going to be super creative out of nowhere. Like, that's where humans seem to have a thing that it can't do. But here's the but, where everybody gets angry with me, and look at your comments, is that at the end of the talk, the same person who designs UIs for a living was asked, well, okay, so what are your ideas? Like, what are the things you're working on? And they didn't really have an answer. And it's like, well, okay, that's fair enough, because I don't have an answer. Like, it's not like I've thought of a better way to interact with a piano sound than a keyboard. But then what you're telling me is that you are doing exactly the same job that the AI is doing on that specific question. And I think what the drag is going to be on society and on humans is that there are a lot of people doing jobs at a middling level right now that can be reproduced with AI, period. They can be as good at a job as a lot of the people doing the jobs. And some of the jobs just don't need to be done better than that. Like, there isn't some amazingly creative way to do certain things. And in those places, we're screwed. But even in creative endeavors, the middle class of that creative endeavor is going to get wiped out.
Yep.
Because the people who are creating music that's like, okay, and it would have a small fan base, but, you know, it's not completely new. That's exactly the stuff that Spotify, who are assholes, are generating for free, which it isn't free because they spend so much money doing it. But on paper, it's for free because they don't have to pay anybody to play the music. And could you argue that if nobody wants to listen to that person's music anymore because the AI generated stuff in exactly the same genre is actually more interesting to listen to, like, philosophically, that's a huge problem. But in terms of just like the way the world works, would you expect anything different? And I'm not going to, you know, there's no answer to that, but it's terrifying how good it is at being pretty good at stuff, is the short answer.
It's very true. At least we have a little bit of a heads up. It's coming, and it's kind of already here. But we do have a little bit of a heads up to upskill or change our skills or change our mentality, because I do think, there's that top 5% that I don't know if it ever will reach that just by nature of what it is. Like you're saying, it's an inference engine. It's probability based. It's next token prediction. It is not actually intelligent. It just is really good at cosplaying.
Now, the one thing, though, that's really interesting, because I'm a total geek, at this same conference I was at, there was a workshop on putting AI into scripts easily, just using pre-built engines and stuff like that. Sure. But it's the first time I've had a description of why AI hallucinates. And it's awesome. So when an LLM gets some information, it plots it on this, like, I don't know how many axes, but this ridiculous number of axes, basically graph. And so you give it 100 million things, and it has all these different points on a graph, and that's how come it can tell the picture of a dog from the picture of a cat. But in between these dots, it has to interpolate. And that's when it gets stuff like horribly, horribly wrong. So that's at the moment where it's like makes shit up. And it's like, what? But also at the moment, it can't tell you what it's doing. So nobody really knows what's happening inside. But if you can get it to tell you what it's doing, then you could harness and even create hallucinations. And then it is coming up with new stuff. It's not at all what artificial intelligence was supposed to be. But it could be really, really interesting because it would be total chaos.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Absolutely. No, it's great. And I do. So the AlphaGo experiment that predated all of this stuff was the Go player, the best Go player at the time, was beaten by a machine because it made a move that no one ever predicted because it was so weird. But it was so optimized to win that it figured out, oh, we'll take a left turn here. So that is exciting. And I guess it comes back to like, what is your definition of creativity at that point? Is it the unexpected? Is it synthesis? Is it something in between? I don't know.
Yeah, because I mean, the synthesis part, that gets to the part that nobody likes what I have to say at all. It's the idea that, you know, what musician on the planet is completely original? The answer is absolutely none. And everything you do is based on copyrighted material that you have listened to. Yes, there's a difference between feeding all that copyrighted material into an LLM, but at the same time, is there? Yes, there is, but is there?
Yeah. No, I mean, it gets back to, is this even how our intelligence to some degree works? Of like, are we creating these graphs inside of our minds? Are we basically linear algebra machines too that are decomposing arrays and turning it into high dimensionality, turning into low dimensionality, doing it all really fast, and there's some loss function because we have neurons instead of bits, and maybe that loss function is where our magic kind of comes from. I don't know, maybe. Yeah. I think a lot of it is like having skin and the environment. Like,
yeah, but it's the, you know, do robots dream of electric sheep? It's like, well, do they dream?
Yes.
And that's where humans are fucking nuts, is we dream all kinds of weird stuff. The philosophy of it and the thought experiments are so great, but the reality of it is actually kind of terrifying.
Yes, exactly.
But the audio tools are awesome.
They're so sick, yeah. Yep. But I mean, isn't that the human experience? That right there in a nutshell. Yeah. So I can't let you go without asking you the final question I ask this of all of my guests. The show is called Love Music More. The segment is called Love Music Why. Andrew Scheps, why do you love music?
Because there is nothing else that can make me feel the way music does. It's like the raw emotions in a safe space. It's like why people watch horror movies. Because they can be scared, but they know they're not going to die. But it's, I don't know. There is something that it does to me emotionally that nothing else does.
Yes.
End of story.
And look where it's taken you.
Yeah, to the middle of England in the rain.
With a cat on your lap. It's that.
Yeah, exactly. I got squid down here. Mole is somewhere. So, yeah.
Well, it was such a pleasure chatting. This is really, 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 really fun for me and hopefully for the audience as well.
Yeah, fun for me. Absolutely.
So where can people follow you, book you? What's the best way for people to
well, I mean, to book me, I'm managed by Frank McDonough, who's LA based. He's fantastic. So yeah, you get in touch with him. He passes stuff on. Follow me. I don't know. It seems like I'm everywhere and nowhere. Like I don't really post on Instagram. I don't do social media very well at all, but I don't know. I'm around. They can watch his podcast.
Yeah.
You know? It's like, that's where I am. And I'll be at NAMM.
NAMM show? Yeah. So
yes.
Maybe we can connect at NAMM show in January. That would be really fun.
Yeah, I will definitely be there. I already booked the flights.
Perfect.
So.
All right. I look forward to it. Thank you, Andrew.
Excellent.